Hi, folks. Sorry to be a little late tonight. Thank you for coming. I can't see your comments yet for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, please make some comments so I know that you're here and I know that I'm receiving comments. I had a little technical difficulty tonight. Oh, there's Bonnie. Hi, honey. Okay, Bonnie's here. I see a few other people are here too. So I'm just going to start off. I'd like you all to share. I haven't had a chance to share at all because I was slowed down by the technical difficulties and I don't want to take any more time. So I'd appreciate any sharing that you can do. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to proceed. Title of this video, Hey Carmen. Whose sunshine? Is Bonnie's sunshine or my sunshine? Anyway, the title of this video is The Dems Are Already Playing to Lose. And as we go through the various posts I want to go through, you'll see why I think they're playing to lose. Hello, Evelina. Nice to see you back tonight. Thank you for coming. So, let me get rid of the promo here. And let me go over some good news to start with. I guess most of you are going to think that it's good news. I thought it was good news. Anyway, maybe I'm the only one who thought it was good news. Maybe it's the only good news of the day. But anyway, Common Dreams article by Jessica Corbett on December 11th, which is yesterday, quote, exactly what the country needs right now, unquote. SCOTUS rejects Texas suit challenging election results. And a quote from the article, quote, it's over, and 90% of the GOP needs to recognize reality, unquote. What the court said, no need to spend a lot of time on this, what the court said was that Texas lacked standing under Article 3 of the Constitution, that's the article dealing with the judiciary, and had not, quote, demonstrated a judicially cognizable interest in the manner in which another state conducts its elections, quote unquote. Since the Constitution leaves to the states the duty of deciding how and in which way their elections will proceed, the suit from Texas failed to establish why the Constitution should be ignored in this instance and why Texas had a judicially cognizable interest in the manner in which the four states it sued conducted their elections. This is a very good decision by the Supreme Court, simply because if Texas could sue the four other states, why couldn't the four states sue Texas? Why couldn't California sue Texas? Why couldn't Texas sue California? Why couldn't, the federal compact was constructed on the basis that the states would be able to handle their elections. If you want to stop that from happening, you have to change the Constitution. You really do. You have to change the constitutions. Otherwise, it's going to be up to the states. That's it. So, Anyway, Marco Rubio made a funny comment. He said, according to the left and their partners in the legacy media, Supreme Court was the appropriate place to legalize abortion and redefine marriage. But it has no business taking up claims regarding a presidential election. Now, that's a distortion if there ever was one. It can take up claims regarding a presidential election. It just can't take up claims saying that the elections in other states were conducted in an illegal manner because it doesn't have a judicially cognizable interest in that. That's it. Anyway, the suit was really a silly one, and almost everyone who knew anything about con law knew it was a silly one. And except for the fact that strange things have been happening all over the land this year, which made some among us a little bit nervous that something would happen here, uh, we were all very sure that this lawsuit, this last desperate attempt of Donald Trump to do something legally, was going to work. So, as Ari Berman says, Biden won by 7 million votes nationwide. It's actually more than 7 million. He won 306 electoral votes, and every state was certified. He won Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 3 times as much as Trump. Trump lost 57 court cases. Supreme Court won't overturn the results. It's over. 90% of the GOP needs to recognize reality. Of course, they're still not recognizing reality. Still not recognizing reality. And, still getting, they was robbed. They was robbed. They was robbed. I don't think so. But they're looking around to see how they can rob. They certainly are doing that. They're still looking around for other ways in which they would be able to rob. Kindly smash the like button a little, please, if you can. Carmen says, loved your 17 minutes of Hulkamania, short take, not so short take, about Mitch McConnell and unconditional corporate liability forgiveness for 5 years. Yeah, that went out in the 1930s, I think. Mitch was trying to bring back the 1930s. Hi, Kay. Kay says, hi, all. Very glad to see you. Did I miss anybody else? Kay says, I got no notice you were live tonight, Joe. Sorry, Kay. I don't know why. I mean, I indicated in the work team I was going to be live. I indicated in the chat group, Kay, I was going to be live. I don't know why you got no notice. Carmen says, hiya, Joe. I was chasing around looking for this all over FB. It's always on my site. I was a little late tonight, maybe 3-4 minutes late, because I had to reboot my computer because suddenly it slowed down to a walk. I rebooted the browser and thought I was all ready, but it was still slow, so I had to reboot the whole machine. Had to clean out all the memory. Something happened. And Travis Fields says, you are an uneducated moron. Who is that? Who is that? Am I an uneducated moron? I don't think so. If anything, Travis, I'm an overeducated moron. Anyway, Kay says, I got no notice you were live tonight. And Carmen says, love your 17 minutes of Hulkamania. Thank you, Carmen. I had fun with the 17 minutes, of Hulkamania, even though it wasn't exactly a short take. But I tried to be short with the others. And Jim Bird said, even when the Democrats win, we lose. I know. And Russ says, I enjoyed your short take on not sitting the GOPers who are still trying to overturn the election. Have I had a short take on that? I don't think I've had a short take on that yet. Uh, I think I said something about it somewhere along the line, but I don't think I've done a short take on it. But I'm going to cover it some tonight. Russ, I'm so glad you're back, by the way, Russ. I really missed you when you were gone. Carmen said, I missed that one. Yeah, Mike, I'm sorry, it's Bill Pascrell. He's the New Jersey rep. He wrote to Pegosi to not swear in the reps involved in the 14th Amendment. Carmen said, Solar Storm made devices misbehave. Maybe that was it. Maybe the Solar Storm was a problem. Anyway, Dolores is saying hi. Hi, Dolores. Russ says, good to see you too. Thank you, Russell. Okay, so next one. Next in line for tonight is, I think it is Bill Pascrell. Yeah, it is Bill Pascrell. It is the take on Bill Pascrell. So I'll go over this. So, citing the 14th Amendment, Pascrell says these GOP House members shouldn't even be sworn in. I thought this was a little much. Anyway, this is by Jessica Corbett and was December 11th on Friday. And here's Bill. As you can see, he's another, to say it in German, he's another Alte. He's another Der Alte, the old one. Anyway, I should talk, right? I'm also the old one. Anyway, he charged that some of his Republican colleagues shouldn't be sworn in for the next session of Congress, accusing them of violating the U.S. Constitution, attempting to demolish democracy by backing President Donald Trump's effort to overturn the November election, which he lost to President-elect Joe Biden. Well, they might have been attempting to demolish democracy. I'm not saying they weren't. But whether they were violating the U.S. Constitution or not, I don't know. Anyway, he wrote a letter to Pelosi and Zoe Lofgren, who's the chair of the Committee on House Administration, and he specifically condemned the more than 100 Republicans. I think in the end there were 126 House Republicans who were supporting a lawsuit filed by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton that aims to block the 4 key battleground states of Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all of which were won by Biden, from voting in the Electoral College. And he's citing the 14th Amendment. He cited Article 1, Section 5, which gives each Chamber of Commerce final authority over membership, as well as Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature, as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such but disability. Now, stated simply, men and women who would act to tear the United States government apart cannot serve as members of Congress, writes the long-term Trump critic. Now, the reason why I thought this was a little much and why there was nothing to it was not because the 14th Amendment doesn't say that. It does say that, but picture this situation. The House convenes, okay? It elects a speaker, Okay, then it gets to the task of administering the oath to each of the members of Congress who are assembled and who, by the way, have already voted for Speaker, okay, or not. But it's their time to take the oath of office, okay, and an objection is rendered by Pascrell in each case to 126 House people questioning whether they should be given the oath of office and seated because they have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the United States. Now, what would constitute the insurrection or the rebellion legally? The fact that they made a public statement endorsing a lawsuit filed by the governor of Texas before the filed by the Attorney General, okay, of Texas, or was it the Secretary of State? I forget. I think it was the AG, okay, of Texas. I think the Secretary of State refused to join in. Okay, but anyway, the AG, who's crooked and being investigated by the FBI, wants a pardon from Trump, filed such a lawsuit. Now, last I heard, the Attorney General of Texas has a right to file lawsuits, however silly they may be. So he's using a legal process, okay, in order to invalidate the votes of other states. The legal process ran its course, and the Supreme Court, as you now know, decided that the Attorney General in the state of Texas had no standing to file that suit. And so its petition was denied. The suit was quashed. So a legal process was used. How can a legal process be a rebellion against the United States? How can it be an insurrection? Can't be an insurrection, okay, against the United States. Now, it might have been anti-democratic. I certainly think it was. But last I checked, democracy has not been written into the Constitution of the United States. Insofar as democracy exists within the United States, it has been informally pieced together over many years, partly through amendments to the Constitution that do not actually declare a democracy or specify the form of the democracy, through various laws in each of the states, through approving popular votes in each of the states, through various other means and court decisions over a period of time. But there's nothing written into the Constitution that says that we have to reach our decisions for the presidency of the United States democratically. In each of the individual states, we have elections where people can vote and where all citizens have the right to vote in every state. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says that each individual state has given up its right to have the legislatures of those states cast the electoral votes if that's what some particular state chooses to do. Sure, it's turning back the clock. Sure, it's in violation of customs. Sure, it's currently in violation of laws. But if a Republican-controlled state suddenly changes its laws, no one can stop that right now because we have an enshrined democracy in our Constitution. But the Attorney General of Texas was using a bona fide legal process. I don't think these 126 representatives can be charged with insurrection. Now, if they took to the streets and they engaged in armed conflict with duly constituted authority, then they would be engaging in an insurrection. But they're not going to do that. So I think this is carrying things a little bit far, refusing to seat the incoming members who are seeking to make Donald Trump an unelected dictator. That may be what they're seeking to do. But that's not a constitutional violation, unfortunately. Unfortunately. It's just not. They have to do something much more concrete to make him an unelected dictator. That's not at issue yet, I'm afraid. He says their actions must be repudiated in the strongest possible terms, quote unquote. Well, I agree with that. I mean, it was dastardly. It was scurrilous. It was dishonest, inherently dishonest. But they've been inherently dishonest for ages and ages now. They think anything goes in an election, no matter how dirty or low down. They bask in voter suppression. They wash themselves in it. They wash themselves in lies. I mean, that party is the father of lies. Quote, the moment we face now may be without parallel since 1860. The fate of our democracy depends on us meeting that moment. It does. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the proper way to meet the moment. And the proper way is not to deny them their seats in the House because they are duly elected members of Congress. The voters in their states voted for them. They voted for them. We cannot simply deny them their seats because we don't like the fact that they joined a lawsuit. The congressman was far from alone in condemning the behavior of GOP officials who have rallied around Paxton's long shot lawsuit and other legal challenges to Biden's decisive victory. I don't think it was that decisive. I think it was uncomfortably close, by the way. Earlier Friday, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also slammed supporters of Trump's attempt to sow doubt about the security of the election. Quote, House Republicans are spending critical time when people are starving and small businesses are shuttering, trying to overturn the results of our election, she tweeted. Quote again, but please tell us more about how, quote, both sides are just as bad, unquote. I entirely agree with her. But that's really neither here nor there in the context of Pascrell's statement and his charge, basically, they shouldn't be tweeted because they were having an insurrection against the United States. That's just a bit much. And what would happen if the House were to do that? Don't you think Mitch McConnell, if he remains the majority leader, would do exactly the same thing to Democratic senators in retaliation for what the House did? And what then? Did Bill Pascrell think this one through? I don't think so. Fellow squad member Ilhan Omar said Thursday, they're attempting a coup in broad daylight and it should not be treated, as anything less. Well, I'm not sure what that means. They were certainly attempting to overturn the will of the voters in those states and in other states as well. But as far as I can tell, they were using legal means to do that. Insofar as they did not use legal means, insofar as they were engaged in voter suppression, that's something that can be contested in the courts. As far as I know, it has not been contested successfully by Democrats, though I believe they certainly engaged in voter suppression in Texas and maybe machine rigging too. But if the Democrats have the evidence for that, they should be presenting it and they should be suing in court themselves. So that's what I think. I mean, I think the whole system is rotten. I entirely agree with the Convo Couch people, with Pasta, and Fiorella, that we need paper ballots, and with Tim Canova too, of course, that we need paper ballots in this country. We have to reform the election system immediately, if not sooner. Get back to paper ballots and public counting of those ballots in a transparent way. That's the only way that any of us are going to be convinced that our elections are open and above board and truly democratic. And we can't let this one go for another 4 years. We have to harass the people of both parties to reform the electoral system in every single state and make it fair and open, because none of us can be certain that that aspect of our democracy is safe until we put in reforms such as those. So the Dems are already losing. Why do I say that? Well, one reason why I say that is because they're not calling immediately for reform of the election system, for going back to paper ballots. So what are the Democrats doing? Well, what some of them are doing is they're combining with Republicans to put forward a bill that only gives $300 a week in unemployment insurance to people whose unemployment insurance has run out, that for 4 months, and which contains no stimulus checks to help out people who have already lost a ton of economic welfare for months now and badly need relief. And Dems had joined with Republicans and were getting ready to pass this shit sandwich bill. Absolutely, they were. Here's another Common Dreams article, quote, Congress cannot go on recess without providing this, unquote. Sanders-Hawley move. Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley, who's the Missouri senator, moved to attach $1,200 payments to must-pass spending bill. This one's by Jake Johnson, staff writer, Cape Common Dreams. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was done on the 11th, too. Yeah. And there's Bernie. He gave a little speech on the Senate floor. Then he handed the podium over to Hawley, Josh Hawley. And they joined forces to introduce an amendment that would provide another round of $1,200 payments to working high-class adults and $500 to each of their children. And the $1,200 payments, of course, go to individuals, all individuals, not simply working-class individuals. Okay, they go to seniors, okay, as well, which we certainly all need. Signifying the urgency of their demand, okay, the senators are attempting to attach the amendment to spending legislation that must pass by Friday night to avert a government shutdown. Well, that particular legislation passed at midnight. The amendment was not attached to it because the bill was substituted for the original bill, which puts off the crisis for 1 week. So this was a stopgap spending bill for a week. While Hawley indicated he would not try to obstruct passage of the short-term spending bill if it doesn't include the payments, Sanders suggested he would be willing to delay the legislation in an effort to attach his amendment. Nobody wants to see the government shut down, he said, in an appearance on CNN Thursday night. But I think it would be outrageous and simply unacceptable for members of Congress to go home to their families when tens of millions of working class families in this country are facing economic desperation. They don't have the food, literally, to feed their kids. They're worried about being evicted. They can't afford health care. They have no income. We've got to address that. And quote, I intend to do everything I can, the Vermont senator added, to make sure that we do, unquote. The Sanders-Hawley amendment would distribute one-time $1,200 payments to individuals who make up to $75,000 per year and joint filers who make up to $150,000 annually. The measure would also provide $500 for each child of eligible recipients. And Hawley said working people are struggling. They should be the first people given relief, not the last. Quote, the crisis of rising unemployment claims, ever-expanding food lines, evictions, and growing credit card debt has been staring us in the face for months. It's time we do something about it and provide emergency relief to Americans. I think we can all endorse that. In a speech on the Senate floor on Thursday, just after the Labor Department reported 1.3 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week, Sanders said refusal to approve direct payments would further cement the view that lawmakers are out of touch with the needs of their desperate constituents, primarily concerned with assuaging the wealthy and the well-connected. Bernie said people are losing their faith in their government. They're hurting. Their kids are hurting. Their parents are hurting. And they look to Washington and they say, do you know that we exist? Or you're just worried about your rich friends and your campaign contributors? That's what the Burns said. And you know, of course, about the bipartisan coronavirus relief packages that lawmakers hope to combine with the must-pass a year-end spending bill, which is now postponed until the 18th of December, and which you can probably fully expect to see postponed again, perhaps even into the Christmas holidays. Because Senator Mitch McConnell shot down a bipartisan relief framework that members have been hashing out for more than a week. He said if it doesn't have the corporate immunity provisions in it, he didn't want to see it. Bernie said, in the midst of so much economic desperation, Congress cannot go on recess without providing this $1,200 emergency assistance to the American people in their time of need. He said in a statement Thursday, quote, I look forward to working across the aisle with Senator Hawley to ensure that the U.S. Senate passes this amendment. Okay, and in another place, he had said, hey, nobody's going home if we don't pass this amendment. In other words, he gave notice he was going to oppose the adjournment of this session of the Senate if there were no stimulus checks, that everybody was going to stay over the Christmas holidays until those checks were out. Well, I hope Bernie has the guts to do that. But the point is, why aren't more Democrats standing with Bernie and Hawley? Why are they too alone right now? Why aren't there more Democrats standing behind them, supporting the $1,200 amendment, just a clean amendment saying there will be $1,200 payments to everybody? Why are they alone? That's not what people want to see. That's not what people want to see from Democrats. I mean, Bernie's not even a Democrat. He's an independent. Hawley's a Republican. Where are the Democrats? Where's Jeff Merkley? I want to know where Jeff Merkley is. Where's Ron Wyden? Where's Kamala Harris? She's still in the Senate, as far as I know. She's still in the Senate. Where's Kamala Harris? Why isn't she supporting this? Why aren't they all standing together? Where's Hickenlooper? Oh, I'm sorry, he's not in the Senate yet. Where's Michael Bennet? Why aren't they all riled up about this? People will think Democrats don't care. And there's the election coming up on January 5th in Georgia. And they'll think Democrats don't care. I don't know if they care. I don't see them caring. Do you see them caring? I don't see them caring. I see them getting ready to go home for a nice, comfortable Christmas, enjoying their millions. They all have millions, don't they? Almost everybody now in the Senate has millions. There's some in the House, quite a few probably, you don't have millions yet. But there it is. Then there are Biden's cabinet picks. Biden's cabinet picks. The hope was he was going to select Marcia Fudge as Secretary of Agriculture. She wanted the job. She really did want it. And here's an article from Ryan Cooper, Joe Biden's agriculture appointment is a slap in the face to black voters. And Ryan points out whether Joe Biden has a successful presidency depends on the upcoming Georgia Senate runoffs more than any other factor. If Democrats sweep both seats, the party will just barely able to control the Senate and will theoretically be able to pass at least some laws, especially if they abolish the filibuster and make D.C. and Puerto Rico new states. Yeah, that would be a great thing for them to do. Maybe they could pass H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, the bills to clean up our elections. That would be great too if they abolish the filibuster. If they lose just one seat, then Mitch McConnell will surely bottle up just about all legislation and may not even allow Biden to staff his administration. That's the next step in Mitch's war against not only the Democrats, but the United States government. But Biden is already betraying his most loyal group of supporters, namely African Americans, and harming Democrats' chances in the runoff in the process. And you know, there are many black Democrats pushing for a qualified, progressive, and black woman to lead the Department of Agriculture. That was Marcia Fudge. But Biden passed her over for a white man whose most notable prior accomplishment was giving in to a racist smear campaign directed at another black woman. Now, Biden is preemptively blaming activists, specifically black activists, in case that decision contributes to his party to whiffing the Georgia runoffs. So he takes this action, and people hear about it. Now he's preemptively blaming the activists themselves. Why? As Dave Dayen writes at The Prospect, Representative Marcia Fudge, a black progressive who sat on the House Agricultural Committee for the past 12 years, so she's got a lot of USDA experience and knowledge, right? This department is traditionally thought to be the preserve of corn-fed white guys from Iowa, basically because it has, quote, agriculture, unquote, in the name. But by far, the biggest responsibility of the department is actually administering the massive food stamp program. Fudge's argument was that she would both be a representation victory, there's never been a black woman in that spot before, and that she would bring an informed new perspective to the department. Rather than funneling subsidies to corporate agribusinesses, she said, she would focus on getting qualified people enrolled in food stamps. Currently, the Trump administration is trying to kick as many people off as possible, helping smaller farmers and environmental conservation. So she wants to do those three things: getting qualified people enrolled on food stamps, helping smaller farmers, and environmental conservation. That's what we need from a Secretary of Agriculture, no? Well, Biden doesn't seem to think so. He thinks we just need an old friend of his, Tom Vilsack, a corn-fed white guy from Iowa who ran the department under President Obama and appointed Fudge to head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Ryan points out, this is a slap in the face of black Democrats in multiple ways. First, it reinforces the stereotype that HUD is where you stuff token black people you don't actually care about, like, for example, Ben Carson. Basically, because it has urban, quote unquote, in the name. That, as well as the fact that it has nothing to do with her area of expertise, is probably why Fudge had said publicly she did not want the HUD job, which, to be clear, is a very important post, says Ryan. Even on cynical political grounds, Biden owes a massive debt to top black Democrats who are also pushing for Fudge. Above all, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, whose well-timed endorsement very likely gave Biden the nomination, certainly greatly contributed to it. It was part of a two-step process. Specifically, the whammy from Clyburn hurt Sanders tremendously, and then the job got finished by Obama when he pulled together the three neoliberals to undercut Bernie on Super Tuesday. And then, of course, there was the coronavirus that caused the people, very many people, to fly to the familiar Biden and not want to take a chance on Bernie in the Super Tuesday primaries. But the most offensive part of this is Vilsack's history with Shirley Sherrod, a former Georgia USDA employee who was the victim of a racist smear campaign back in 2010, as she told me for an article I wrote several years ago. The story centered around a speech she'd given at an NAACP event. There she described how the experience of growing up under brutal Jim Crow racism, her father and cousin were murdered by white men who got off scot-free, led her to organize to help black people exclusively in her early career. Thus, when a white farmer, Roger Spooner, came to her organization in 1985 seeking aid, she initially steered him to a white lawyer, but help was not forthcoming. Spooner returned to ask again. It was a message from God, Sherrod concluded, instructed her that it wasn't only black people who needed help. Working with him, quote, working with him made me see it's really about those who have versus those who don't, unquote, she said. She did what she could for Spooner, who kept his farm, and the two remain friends to this day. It's hardly possible to imagine a more wholesome and heartwarming story of racial reconciliation, as if, remember, the Titans was about farm mortgages. But Andrew Breitbart, the conservative propagandist, who even then was infamous for racist duplicity, published a misleading edit of the video of the event, making it seem like she was refusing to help the farmer because he was white. Vilsack, an entirely typical display of Democratic backbone, soiled his pants from gusset to knee, and his deputies forced Shirley Sherrod to pull over by the side of the road and type out her resignation on her phone before USDA brass had even heard her side of the story. After the truth came out, Vilsack apologized and offered her a new job, which she understandably declined. So I pick Vilsack. As Dayan notes, it's probably because he's been a Biden loyalist since 1988, but also because he is a cat's paw for Big Ag. For 8 years under Obama, Vilsack blithely approved a steady roll-up of farm markets under ruthless oligopolist agribusiness and predatory middlemen, which has deeply harmed farm communities across the nation. As Alex Salmon points out at the Prospect, it's not a coincidence that since leaving office, Vilsack has been collecting $1 million a year in what amount to ex post facto bribes from the dairy lobby. Most farmers therefore hate his guts, particularly black ones, because Vilsack was indifferent to their needs to the point of faking up statistics to boast about a non-existent resurgence in black farming. This presents a major problem for the Georgia runoffs. Black organizations in Georgia and across the country are furious about Vilsack because of the snub of Fudge, his abysmal record at the USDA, and the fact that Sherrod is very popular among Georgia Democrats. Quote, it's very disappointing they even want to consider him coming back after what he has done to limited resource farmers and what he continues to do to destroy lives, unquote, said Michael Stovall, the founder of independent Black Farmers to Politico. The appointment of Vilsack risks deflating enthusiasm in an election which will turn entirely on which party is best able to motivate their base to turn out. If Biden is throwing his most loyal voters under the bus before he has even taken office, why bother to vote? Biden is evading the problem by arguing it's not his horrible decision, risking the party's Senate majority, but Black activists making irresponsible demands. Ryan Grimm reports at The Intercept that at a meeting with civil rights leaders, Biden dismissed the idea that Vilsack was a liability and instead argued that police reform was the real threat. Quote, that's how they beat the living hell out of us across the country, saying we're talking about defunding the police, unquote, he said. No, Joe, that's not how they beat the living hell out of you across the country. It was rather your record on the crime bill in the mid-90s. That was one of the reasons why they beat the hell out of us across the country. And the other reason was that you kept telling people that under no circumstances were you going to vote for Medicare for all. If it crossed your desk, that you were going to veto it, you ass. I mean, that was sure to get people very unenthused. I know you ran ahead of the ticket, but nobody on the ticket wanted to run on Medicare for all because they thought you were against it. None of those Senate candidates would run on Medicare for all. So they didn't get the advantage of running on Medicare for all. You had the advantage of running against Trump, who so many people wanted to get beat. They didn't have that advantage. They were just running against regular Republicans who were supporting Trump. They needed another advantage. That advantage was Medicare for all. You deprived them of that advantage because they were basically running as Biden Democrats. Most all those Senate candidates were. All of them on the cusp of winning, within a few points, of winning. And they weren't able to run on the most popular issue the Democrats across the country had. The issue supported by 88% of the Democrats was not available for Democratic candidates for the Senate across the country to run on. Now, there were many candidates who were Democrats who were running for the Senate who wouldn't have run on that anyway. Hickenlooper probably wouldn't have run on it. And Steve Bullock probably would never have run on it. But Raphael Warnock might have run on it. He might have run on it if you weren't running against it. Maybe Mike Espy would have run on it in Mississippi, and maybe he could have won his race in Mississippi. Maybe Al Gross up in Alaska would have run on it. Maybe Cal Cunningham would have run on it. Maybe he could have won with Medicare for all. I mean, really, if you had run a more progressive campaign, maybe you would have gotten more votes beating Trump, and maybe you would have had some coattails, and you might have been able to pull them in on the coattails. And how about Sarah Gideon up in Maine? If you were running on Medicare for all, don't you think she would have run on Medicare for all? And maybe that would have pulled her up against Susan Nothing Collins? Jeez. Going on. Neither Biden nor either one of the Georgia Senate Democratic candidates support defunding the police. Biden even bringing it up as politically idiotic as it just ignites another round of Democratic infighting and focuses yet more media attention on a slogan that moderate Democrats say is poison. But activist sloganeering has the handy property of being completely outside of Biden's control. Therefore, a perfect scapegoat for a loss that just became more likely. As usual, pinning the blame for failure on someone else is the first, second, and third priority of moderate Democratic elites. When Biden was consolidating the Democratic nomination, I worried he simply didn't care about the scale of the task confronting him. This country cannot afford another do-nothing presidential administration designed mainly for post office buck-raking careers. But it seems that is what we're likely to get. And Ryan, in this article, missed talking about, probably wanted to keep the article short, he missed covering the other part of what Ryan Grimm covered in his Intercept Deconstructed podcast. Okay. Specifically, one of the things that Biden said to the activists he talked to, the black leaders he talked to, I guess they weren't really activists unless you consider Al Sharpton to be an activist. I'm not sure I do. Well, I guess he still goes and he still preaches, right? I guess that must qualify as some kind, of activism. In between appearances on MSNBC. But anyway, he was preaching to them that he doesn't think he can do much. He can undo the executive orders of Donald Trump. But there are certain things people want him to do on day one that he just can't do because it's unconstitutional. He didn't say exactly what he meant, but it seemed to me that he was talking about things like forgiving student debt. Why is that unconstitutional? He never said why it was unconstitutional. The law explicitly gives the power to the president to forgive student debt. It's there in the law. If the debt is owned by the government, as most of the student debt is right now, the president has the power to forgive it. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. What gets me angry is this is a tactic which the Obama administration also used, telling people that they couldn't do certain things because those things were unconstitutional. And the things were never unconstitutional. The administration was lying about what they were talking about because they just wanted people off their backs to stop talking about that. Usually the press just complied. And so, it's unconstitutional. Well, can't do it. Okay. There are enormous number of things that Biden can do using the powers of the presidency other than just undoing all the harm that Trump had done. Now, he can undo all that harm, and people will like that, but it's not enough to get him through the election of 2022 with an increase in Democratic members of Congress and with control of the Senate. If he wants to win that particular election, he's going to have to give people something that's meaningful to them. Student debt elimination is one thing he can do, but something else that he can do is he can work with the Federal Reserve using the authority of Section 14 of the Federal Reserve Act. He can talk to Jay Powell. He can point out to him that there isn't any help coming from Congress because of what the Republicans and Mitch McConnell are doing there. That if Jay Powell wants to help the economy, as Joe Biden does, if he wants to improve the economy in a meaningful way for the American people, he has to provide loans under Section 14 at low interest rates to state and local governments, and then he has to roll over those loans in perpetuity, if necessary, to effectively make them grants so that the state governments can get out of the hole caused by the pandemic through no fault of their own. That's something the president can do. It just takes talking to the Federal Reserve chair. And I think Jay Powell would be open to that. I think Biden could help to do that. I think Biden can lower the Medicare age, that he can lower the Medicare age administratively himself. If I'm not mistaken, that authority is there. At the American Prospect, there was a series devoted to what things Biden could do on day one, not things involving the undoing of what Trump had done. It's understood that he has to do that kind of thing. But there's so much more he could do. There are authorities HUD has that he can work on. He can end debt ceiling crises. Joe Biden can do. He can end debt ceiling crises by having the Treasury Secretary order the mint to create a 1 ounce, $100 trillion platinum coin, and then deposit that coin in the mint's account at the New York Fed. And he can have the Treasury Secretary sweep the seigniorage, the profit, the difference between the face value of the coin and the cost to produce it and get it up to the Fed. He can have the Treasury Secretary, this is all in the law, sweep the seigniorage profits, almost a whole $100 trillion, into the Treasury spending account. Now, Treasury would not be able to spend that money. Treasury can only spend money which is appropriated by Congress. But once having the reserves in that account, all deficit spending for the foreseeable future would be covered by the reserves created by that coin. And the repayment of all current debt, the $27 trillion, could be paid back as it falls due over 30 years, covered by the proceeds from that particular coin. That's an awful big thing Biden could do. There would still be budgetary fights. There would still be threats of government shutdowns. But the debt ceiling threat would no longer be there. That would be inoperative because Treasury wouldn't be issuing any more debt instruments. How about the need for private sector people to have a safe place to put their money and earn interest? How about the need for the big shots and the corporations needing a safe place? That can be covered by the Federal Reserve itself. All the Federal Reserve has to do is decide to pay higher interest on the reserves sitting at the Fed, a higher rate of interest. That's all the Fed has to do. It pays some interest on reserves now. It has the administrative power to up the interest on reserves anytime it wants to. There's no need for these debt instruments. They don't have to be sold. As I've said many times, they're not a financial problem for the United States because the U.S. is a monetary sovereign. But they are a political problem, a constant political problem. If you don't believe me, go back a few days and watch Mitt Romney when he stood in front of an audience as the Gang of Eight was announcing its compromise bill for relief on COVID. And he talked about how he hated the debt and the deficit and how that was really a big issue for him. Now, he didn't want to add to it, but relief was needed for the American people right now. So he was going to support a relief bill. But he railed at the debt. He still believes it's a problem. He still believes he gets points for condemning the debt. Fudge is not the head of HUD yet. She's been appointed. She's been nominated to be the head of HUD. She has to go through the confirmation process, Kay. And she may not be confirmed by the Congress. She may not be confirmed as the head of HUD. Whether she's confirmed or not, in part, is going to depend on what happens on January 5th in those elections in Georgia. Anyway, going back to Romney. It's right there in the speeches of those centrist senators and House members, how worried they still are over the debt. The $1 trillion coin gets rid of the debt issue. It would be apparent to everyone within 6 months, because within 6 months, trillions of dollars of current debt would be paid back. How do I know that? Because a lot of our current debt is in 3-month debt instruments and 6-month debt instruments. A large portion of it. I don't know exactly what. I could look it up. Maybe 25%. Perhaps 1/3 of it. Think about it. Okay, let's say it's 1/3. What's our debt as of today? The national debt everybody's worried about. It's $27 trillion. If 1/3 of it gets paid back in 6 months, that would only be $18 trillion. Hey, folks, look, we paid off $9 trillion in 6 months. There isn't any debt problem. See how easy it was? We just minted a $100 trillion coin. That, my friends, would be the end of the debt BS in politics. You wouldn't have to listen to it anymore. Yeah, I was glad to see Rohan and Rashida take up the mint a coin banner too. Okay. So obviously Biden's already trying to play it to lose. already trying to play it stupid. He's terribly sensitive to criticism. He doesn't listen to people. He tells them lies in response. I mean, he must know he was lying to him. It wasn't unconstitutional. Nobody was asking him to do anything unconstitutional. I hope the black leaders gave him a piece of their mind. I hope they told him, look, you want us to get our people out there for you? They're not going out there for you if you're talking like this to them. They're not going out there for you if you're refusing to appoint someone like Marcia Fudge to be the Secretary of Agriculture after the travesty of Shirley Sherrod. First of all, you probably should have appointed Shirley Sherrod. But failing that, you should certainly appoint Marcia Fudge to be Secretary of Agriculture. I mean, what kind of politician are you? Don't you want to please the people who were so loyal to you in the election? Are you trying to get them PO'd at you? Anyway. Let's not share that one anymore. Oh, I guess I stopped sharing that one. Let's go back to one final thing I wanted to call attention to. Also from Common Dreams. Oh, the Ryan Cooper article was from The Week, by the way. I don't think I said that. It was from The Week. He's the guy who I think is the best writer at The Week. Anyway, December 10th, 2020. This was by Elise Gould, who works at the Economic Policy Institute, the EPI in Washington. She's a labor economist. Any hope for a quick recovery off the table unless Congress acts now, she says. Signs saying eviction is violence. And she starts talking about jobs and unemployment. Last week, the BLS reported that as of the middle of November, the economy was still 9.8 million jobs below where it was in February. And of course, since then, things have been getting worse. It's now the middle of December. It's almost a month later. We won't be able to find this out until early January. But you can take it from me. Places have been shutting down. It's going to be over 10 million jobs below where it was in February. She's pointed out job growth slowed considerably in November. And she says the JOLTS reports show little change in October. A clear and confirming sign, that the recovery is not charging ahead. In October, job openings rose very mildly from 6.5 to 6.7 million, while hires softened slightly, 5.9 to 5.8 million. Separations increased from 4.8 to 5.1 million. In other words, the economy is getting worse again. We now know we're in the middle of the pandemic. Today's results. Where are we today? The dismal picture shows one of our own, Joy Marie Mann, was rushed to the hospital with COVID. Absolutely terrified. According to Worldometer, we're at 305,082 fatalities. And the statistics for today were 2,309 deaths. I have after a few days this week of 3,000 plus deaths, fatalities went down a little. I suspect that maybe reporting went down a little, and we'll see them up soon. As soon as next week starts, things tend to slow down for weekends. But these fatalities are built in by all the new cases each day. We had 220,000 new cases today, and just yesterday we were at 247,000. We're running over 200,000 new cases each day, considerably over that. We are now up to 919 deaths per million. We're shutting down again. We can't sustain these openings without having key small businesses shut down once again. Okay, the United States has been surpassed by another pocket nation, specifically Montenegro, under a million population, 628,000. So there are now 3 pocket nations. I'm going to ignore them in the rankings. Okay, the United States taking away the 3 pocket nations. We're number 9 in the world. We're 919 deaths per million, and the UK is 941. They are now 22 deaths per million in front of us. As the days went by this week, we began once again to catch up to them. We'll see what happens next week. Fatalities continue to accelerate here. We're still getting over 200,000 cases per day. The increasing fatalities are built in by all the cases. The curve of new cases is not being bent. That means the curve of future fatalities is not being bent either. So, can go away from that. Job openings are now substantially below where they were before the recession began. 6.7 million at the end of October compared to 7.1 million on average in the year prior to the recession. And also, the data release for today only covers through October, so it doesn't even capture November's slowdown in job growth. She points out the economic pain remains widespread, with over 26 million workers hurt by the coronavirus downturn. Without congressional action to stimulate the economy, we're facing a slow and painful recovery. What does Biden plan to do about it? All he's saying is, don't expect too much. I have limited power. I can't do much with my new executive orders. I can only undo what Trump has done. And he says to the black leaders, I've done more than anybody else for you at this stage of things. Done more? What has he done? He appointed Marsha Fudge to HUD. He appointed a black professor, a female, to head the Council, of Economic Advisors. He appointed a general who's black to be the head of the Defense Department. So, what do these things do for black people? Well, the HUD appointment, of Marsha Fudge, probably will be beneficial. I'm sure she'll get into the job and she'll do an excellent job there, even though she's much more experienced, Kate, agriculture, and would have hit the ground running in terms, okay, of agriculture. What do his appointments really do for black people? So far, I think they do very little. I think they do very little. Anyway, Elite School says the first dose of austerity exhibited by the loss to the vital enhanced unemployment insurance benefit in August took a toll on job creation. It says we must not have that mistake again. The expiration of vital pandemic unemployment insurance benefits on December 26th will leave 12 million workers without a safety net, and over 4 million others will have already exhausted their benefits by this cutoff. This spells trouble, not only for workers and their families who are desperately trying to keep a roof over their heads and put food on the table, especially with the eviction moratorium also set to expire on December 31st, but also for the recovery itself. It didn't have to be this way. If the suite of UI programs were reinstated and extended through 2021, workers would not lose that valuable safety net, and it would spur the creation of 5.1 million more jobs in 2021. That's her projection. That's her projection. And it's based on another blog from the EPI. So I wanted to point that out. Okay, I wanted to point out that Biden is not responding in any concrete way. He's not saying anything about this kind of thing. He's just going through the work of getting the nominees for his cabinet in place. We again have to remember those are only nominees. They are not appointments yet. I'm going to look at your comments now. Anyway, he better get cracking. Okay, he better get moving, or we are in for a very bad time. Kay says, if you let them get away with it now, it will become a habit for the GOP. And Kay says they need to pay a price. They do need to pay a price. Let them pay a legal price. Those who have committed crimes should be prosecuted. There are people in the Trump administration who have committed crimes. They should be prosecuted by the new Justice Department. They shouldn't be allowed to get away scot-free. No one is above the law. I'm not for doing anything that keeps people above the law. But those Republicans engaging in these particular shenanigans are engaging in legal, fruitless shenanigans. There's no price to be paid for that except quick dismissal by the courts. And the Democrats have been getting quick dismissals of all these lawsuits. I mean, maybe they can sue the RNC for filing frivolous lawsuits if the RNC specifically filed any. I think it was just other people, PACs and other actors that were filing these lawsuits. Trump's committees of various kinds. Carmen says, I wouldn't mind seeing Democrats actually get a spine and fight for something, though, even if it's the 14th Amendment issue. It's not a question of fighting for something. They have to fight for something that's legal. They can make a lot of noise about how the Republicans acted, and they can try to make them pay a price at the polls. They have to talk to people seriously about how scurrilous the actions of the Republicans have been. Russ says, perhaps I had that Common Dreams article in mind. Yep, that's the Common Dreams article, all right. Kay says they wanted to overthrow the election. They did. They wanted to overthrow it, but they wanted to overthrow it through legal means by lawsuits in the courts. Carmen says judges do get highly upset about frivolous lawsuits in their courts, so it could backfire. Well, it could have backfired, but instead of just accepting the frivolous lawsuits, they should have been sanctioned by the courts involved. The courts knew the lawsuits were frivolous. They should have sanctioned the people. Had they started sanctioning them early, there probably wouldn't have been 57 lawsuits. Had the first 7 gotten fines levied on the people who brought these lawsuits, they probably wouldn't have had 57 lawsuits to contend with. Kay says, thanks. Even called for sedition for Texas. Texas even called for sedition for Texas. Evelina says, and so it did backfire. Kay says, good to see you, Evelina. Carmen says, so now Texas wants to cede, right? I say let them go. Just take Adolf with them. Well, you know, we got a lot of poor people in Texas. And we have a lot of black people in Texas. And a lot of Hispanic people in Texas. Okay. And those people can't get out of Texas. I don't know if they would go if they could get out of Texas. I mean, it's their home. We can't simply write off those people, can we? I had the same thought today when I heard they were talking about seceding and say, let them go, let them go. Someone a few days ago tweeted, somebody by the name of Siskin, I understand, actually tweeted a map that might result if the United States were to break up. And basically, the map had the West Coast and the East Coast also pretty far down, and the North Central states actually seceding and combining with Canada, okay, to create, a new nation. I have to admit that that suggestion, is very attractive to me, or at least would be if the state that I live in now were to be a part of the new union. Of course, for that to happen, it probably would be necessary for Pennsylvania, but to go along with the New England states, in New York, and for New Jersey and Delaware, and Maryland, and then Virginia would probably constitute the new border with the successor state in the South, to the United States. I don't know how far over the West Coast would actually go. It seems to me that Arizona would probably want to be with California. And then also New Mexico might want to be with California, and Nevada might want to be with California, and Colorado might want to be with California. So that West Coast might come down and go like this, and then that whole complex up there. Canada has roughly 38 million people now. So with all those northern states essentially joining and California joining, and uh, it would probably be a state of something like 200 million people in population. I mean, maybe even more. It would have greater population than the southern states would if something like that happened. Uh, that's an easy way to get Medicare for all, because Canada would insist that all the new states that came in respect the Medicare for all system of Canada. Everybody would have to agree to live under Medicare for all. That would be an easy way for us to get Medicare for all. Of course, Canada has its own neoliberal problems, as we see with Justin Trudeau, okay, and his idiocy up there now. It's not exactly a wonderful administration up there for us. Kay says 11 were kicked out for supporting the Confederacy for not accepting Lincoln's presidential election. Well, that's true, but they seceded. They actually seceded from the Union. They weren't kicked out. They seceded from the Union. They kicked themselves out. That's what happened. Carmen says, they're the architects of gerrymandering cheating. They're not the only architects of gerrymandering cheating. Carmen says, these two convo couch caught COVID, I read 2 days ago, but I wasn't sure if the post was recent or not. I think I had heard that Johnny's tsunami had caught COVID, and maybe Pasta, though Pasta seems all right now. I saw him but today. He seemed just fine, in fine shape. And Fee seemed great too. They both were as feisty as ever. Carmen said, these two Convo Catch caught, I read 2 days ago, I wasn't sure, from Convo Catch correction. Evelina says, Venezuela has both paper ballots and electronic for general elections. Carmen says, how about folks that can't even work and don't qualify for disability? Oh, they're in a bad way. In a bad way. Evelina says, we do too, but our machines are easily hacked. Russ Goldman said, yeah, they've been easily hacked since 2004. Russ Goldman says, do you know if the 1.4 million are new first-time applicants? I think that was the total number of applicants for unemployment benefits. I don't think that figure includes the first-time applicants. There is probably such a figure in the BLS report. Kay says Bernie fights for we the people. Kay says Dems have no spine. Russ says they're AWL. And Carmen says, why didn't they object to adjournment before summer vacay? Now we're so far behind, it's like falling into a bottomless pit. It wasn't actually an adjournment then, it was a recess. I think the rules are different for recess. But I think they probably could have objected. There were a number of things involved there, though. Uh, I'm not exactly sure what the specifics of that situation were now. But Bernie could probably have objected more strongly back then. Now I think he feels completely up against the wall about it. That's why he finally took some action. Evelyn has said that's why paper ballots are a good backup when matched against the electronic vote. I don't think there should be an electronic vote. I don't think the electronic vote is needed. I really don't, Evelina. I think we just got to do it with the paper ballots. and forget the convenience of having an electronic vote, because we can't stop the hacking of the voting machines. If you have the paper ballots as a backup, okay, it's something, okay, but how are you going to know whether that first wave, okay, of electronic ballots are right, or whether they've been rigged? I mean, when it's a backup for later, it's too easy to cheat. It's too easy to influence the election by having early calls from the media, by not knowing exactly what the situation is, by everybody shouting fraud, fraud, fraud. No, you need the paper ballots from the beginning. Carmen says, they're corporate too. Kay says, doesn't work that way here, Evelyn upon. And Evelyn says, which is why paper ballots are needed as backup, matched up against the electronic vote. Kay says, our machines were made to hack right here in Ohio. Yeah. Evelyn says, but isn't that why paper ballots are necessary for the final recount? Well, I addressed that already, how I feel about that. Carmen says, what did Biden say on the exposed reporting that is so controversial? I haven't seen much on it. Well, what he said is, first, he lied to them about the unconstitutionality, okay, of different actions. He also told them that they should be satisfied with what he's done because he's done more than anybody else up to this point, which is bullshit. Which is bullshit. He could have done more up until now. They have a right to complain about it. They really do have a right to complain about it. He's mostly appointed people who are friends of his that he's had previous experience working on. And they're neoliberal people. And they're Obama administration people. In large part, he's been reconstituting the Obama administration. That was not an administration that was good for black people. Kay says, not here. It's either paper, or machine. Carmen says, corn-fed white guys from Iowa laugh out loud. Now I have pigs snorkeling around in my head. Evelina says, you need both. The electronic vote is useful for a quick count. Paper ballots for a recount. No, I don't think you need both. I don't think you need a quick count. I think you can have the paper ballots counted if you're doing it from the beginning. And if you allow the states to count the votes as they come in, okay, with early votes. Well, take the Oregon mail-in voting system. With the Oregon mail-in voting system, they're all paper ballots. They're all coming in with paper. And the count is ready. The count is ready very, very quickly. They don't have any delays. There are no major delays over in Europe in counting the results. They're still using the paper ballots. Let people count those votes as they come in. I think the vote count can be completed at worst in 2 or 3 days, and we probably know who's going to win after the first day. It's not so much to have people wait for the outcome of a presidential election. Carmen says Biden's going to fuck around and make Twitler possible in 24. Make him probable in 24. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid In other words, if he loses both houses in 2022, everything he tries to do in 23 or 24 is going to be blocked. He's going to look like a fool. People are going to be totally frustrated, and they're going to vote for whoever runs for the Republicans, including Twitler. Kay says, we need all paper here as our government is too corrupt. Evelina says, don't be a snob, laugh out loud. Carmen says, you don't hear nothing from Kamala, not a squeak. Unusual for a rat. She will probably pretty much be quiet following Biden's lead. She'll view her vice presidency as she serving Biden. Carmen says, Evelina upon snob, not sure how I'm being a snob. And Billy Aiken said, Ronald Reagan screwed up the Democratic Party. They haven't been the same since. The Reagan Democrats, I remember those assholes, I do. They call them different things today. But they're the same trickle down, neoliberal, corporate Wall Street, Silicon Valley, investment class, elitist tours they were back then. They chose money over people. They'll continue to do it. That's life in the big city. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is turned into Nazis. The future outlook for this country is blah. Okay, thanks for the blast of total negativism, but I don't completely agree with you. I think that the screw up of the Democratic Party actually started, I think it started under Jimmy Carter. Okay, I mean, I love Jimmy as an ex-president. He was not a neoliberal, certainly, but he was a conservative Democrat, hung up on fiscal responsibility, and he's the one who started the fiscal responsibility craze that has done so much to cause our problems. I've written this up in my book called Real Fiscal Responsibility, Volume 1, The Progressive Give-Up Formula. First one to follow that formula was Jimmy Carter. And Carmen Muniz says, oh, they were the ones pissing in people's faces, trickle down, and turning around saying, oh, it's just raining. Oh, the Republicans always did that. I mean, they've been doing that since I was a little boy, the trickle-down theory. Yeah, that wasn't new in the 70s, okay, but, it wasn't new in the 80s. I remember when Tom Dewey was pulling that in the 40s. I'm old enough to remember that. My first consciousness was, it's going to trickle down upon you. Carmen says, go to the Humanist Report here on FB, third video down, says Cindy Dragon. Well, thanks for coming, Cindy, but why should I go to Mike's report? What did Mike have to say? I mean, I might have seen Mike's report. I did look at one of his reports today. I like Mike. He's pretty good. Evelina says, I agree, except that the big city doesn't have to change you if you've got a spine. Carmen says, thanks for the link. Catherine Tokarska says, unfortunately, AG also includes factory farming, also promoting products made from use and abuse of other sentient beings, especially the docile ones. That's why we need Marcia Fudge, because she's going to do a lot to help to clean up the food chain, I hope. She knows about that. She knows about that. She knows about those kinds of problems. Kay says Biden needs to get rid of Rump's SS heads too, or Social Security expansion will be impossible, right? Kay. And Carmen says, Georgia voters that went out of their way to help Biden win, we're sure going to be pissed. Evelina says, but isn't that why Biden didn't want to run on Medicare for all, because he wants to expand Obamacare? I think he didn't want to run, okay, on Medicare for all because he doesn't want to get to Medicare for all, and he's running on expanding Obamacare because somehow he thinks that's going to be enough for people. It isn't. It'll never be enough for people. It's an unstable system because the profit for the private sector, the unconscionable profits for the private sector are built into it. Deborah says, here, I hate Joe Biden more than Donald Trump. Evelina says, know what you mean, laugh out loud. Catherine Tokarska says, Biden can, by executive order, tell the U.S. Department of Ed to cease and desist um, all collections. Yes, but even better, he can cancel the debts. He can cancel those debts in full. Forgive the debts. He can have a debt jubilee with the student debts. Kay says, if he doesn't expand SS, I'll be highly pissed too. That was the only reason I voted for him besides getting rid of Rump. Most other seniors did too. I think he will. He will increase Social Security payments somewhat. Don't expect a whole lot, though. Don't expect a whole lot. It might be an expansion of maybe $200 a month for some people. It might be a percentage expansion of some kind. I'm not sure how he's going to do it. It might be with Warren's plan, which is just, nibbling around the edges. Carmen Muniz, hashtag student loan cancellation. Catherine Tokarska says Biden is a total prick. Difference between him and Trump is window dressing. I don't think I agree with that because I don't think Biden is ever going to be a dictator or try to become a dictator, okay, or anything else. But I agree he's a total prick. I don't think that's window dressing. Evelina says Dr. Joe is making us hate Biden even more than we already do. Laugh out loud. Catherine Tokarska is going to watch my progressive friends who voted for him shit themselves for the next 4 years. Well, I don't think we're going to shit ourselves. I think we knew what we were voting for, and we knew that the only possible way to move him is to, just to rip him to shreds until he stops. And we also know that there might not be much chance of him stopping, even if we rip him to shreds. Tony says student loans debt, but mostly from GSE, Sally Mae, Bill Ackman said, and most student debt in general. People will never be able to pay it. Will have to be forgiven eventually. Ackman said at a conference, I can send it to you. Well, I don't know. We can look it up. I know there's $1.4 million in student debt that can be $1 trillion that can be forgiven by Joe Biden. It's something like 80% of all the outstanding student debt is currently owned by the federal government. I've been seeing that statistic for years. It may even be higher than that now. But Deborah Wilson says, the coin is the dope, positive thing, Joe. Yes, Deborah, it is. Please recall, the only person who has written a book on the $1 trillion coin, the platinum coin, is me. It's called Fixing the Debt Without Breaking America, and it's on sale for $9.99, okay, in Amazon. It's a Kindle ebook. And I encourage you to buy that book. It's a great book, even if I do say so myself. Catherine Tokarska says, I'll be dead by then, not to mention all those who've already checked out due to endless hopelessness, crushing all life by debt. No children for me, too late. I'm so sorry, Catherine. Evelina says maybe hate is too strong a word. Peeved is perhaps a better word. Carmen says, so Biden's reneging of fudge will stop Benita's run now as well, right? No, I don't think so. I think Fudge is going to take HUD because she wants to serve, and she knows she'll be doing a lot of good at HUD. HUD is a very powerful position, very significant for people. The housing crisis is going to be a huge crisis, and Marcia Fudge will do a very good job in coping with it if she possibly can with the authority she has. She will pull out all the stops to help that. She's that kind of person. Maybe that's so Nina will be running because I don't think Marcia is going to be staying in Congress. Oh, gee, I thought I saw Bonnie walking in here, but she doesn't seem to be here. So anyway, so I'm pretty sure Nina's going to be running, and Fudge is going to be the head, okay, of HUD if she gets confirmed by Mitch McConnell. I think Mitch is going to be the problem again. If you don't want Mitch to be the problem, what you got to do is see to it that those 2 Senate seats in Georgia do go to the Democrats. Then Fudge will become the head of HUD. That will be a good thing. By the way, Biden's appointment, thank you, honey. You're welcome. Biden's appointment, okay, for HHS, Javier Becerra, is also apparently a very good appointment. He's been a supporter of Medicare for All since the 1990s, and he was appointed by Biden anyway. I think he will encourage states to go Medicare for All. States can receive a waiver to institute programs of their own in their own states and still get the federal aid that goes to states under the Affordable Care Act. With that federal aid, it may be fiscally possible for certain states to install Medicare for All. States like Pennsylvania, Minnesota, California, New York, Washington State, and maybe Oregon too. There are a number of states that could go for Medicare for All. Once those states are seen to actually be using it, not going broke, seeing how it works, it is likely to spread to other states. It gets the camel's nose in the tent. That would be good if that happens. Having Javier Becerra, okay, in that position makes it much more likely to happen than having a bunch of other people in that position. And Catherine says, cancellation now or go F yourself is my response. Not you, Antonio. Those Wall Street ass-lickers. Carmen says, Evelina Pont, we already hated Jim. I think it was supposed to be him. But hated 4 more years of Adolph Moore. Evelina says, think that's the idea, laugh out loud. Carmen says, him, correction. Kay says, but Nina is running. Evelina says, isn't she going for that spot? Yes, she is. Russ says, glad to see Rohan and Rashida take up the coin banner. Yeah, so was I. I've been boosting the ABC Act ever since in my tweets. I must have boosted the ABC Act 5 times this week alone. Catherine Tokarska says, Biden is pro student loan debt. When we have no money, we have to borrow. People with student loans accumulate credit card debt as they struggle. Wall Street makes money on credit cards. I know. And that's all true, Catherine. Kay says, yes, Nina set up her election committee. I heard today. Evelina says, disgusting, isn't it? Catherine says, I'm probably going to miss Trump soon. At least he was so dumb. He would get in his own way, saying the silent parts out loud. I'll never miss him. He did so much damage, constantly doing damage, constantly doing mean stuff. Now, on his way out, he's doing stuff just to be mean. He's just effing mean. Can't stand it. Just evil, looking to hurt people everywhere for political gain, perceived political gain. It's not even real political gain. He doesn't gain politically for making enemies everywhere in every corner. That's why he lost. He wasn't satisfied with one or two enemies. He made enemies of every group, every major group in this country, except for the Make America Great Again people. Carmen says precisely, and it's that way with everything. Kay says, we need Nina in Congress badly. Evelina says, Biden is closed-minded. I do believe, yeah, me too. Carmen says, yeah, DT was manageable due to his stupidity, but then came Barr. Catherine Tokarska says, he is as corrupt and demented as a whole lot of them. Antonio says, yes, most people recognize Biden's victory was a weak victory. Dems lost counties and seats in the House and the Senate. Okay, if the Dems had been more consistent in the past, Trump wouldn't have ever won. The Democrats won, but it was a simple victory. They won one seat in the Senate, and they won the presidency. And that's about all they won. It did not touch anybody in Lindsay and Mitch's states. If the GOP is on its knees, well, the Democratic Party is not better. That's true. Carmen says, due to his stupidity, correction, Trump family will be in the running 2024 and may win again, I predict. Yeah, I'm very worried about that. Carmen says, savage joy, oh no. Antonio says, this recoveries people are talking about are like stock market recoveries. The USA has a lot of work in the underground economy. Carmen says, I hope not. Catherine says, yes, she is ill. Carmen says, oh, gad, got to round up toilet paper and Lysol in a jiffy. Steve Day says, hi. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Catherine Costco says, I'm about to go back out. I've been housed by a friend who recently lost her husband, not related to COVID. She's let me stay as I do some work on my van life. Hashtag van life. Carmen says, but Death DeSantis swears no shutdown ever again, no matter how many fare for the Dow. Oh, no matter how many die for the Dow. Oh, I got it. Okay, Carmen, got it. Evelyn says, I don't think so. Something tells me a third-party coalition may be in store. Oh, I sure hope so. Catherine Tokarska says, it is interesting van living in a pandemic, especially once gyms close down. Colder now, so 1 gallon outdoor shower is not so pleasant. I'm probably going to the desert, says Catherine. Oh, wow. Kay says, hopefully a movement for a People's Party. Yeah, People's Party is up in Maine. Antonio says, I read something but did not really grasp because I did not read the bill in question. But in the CARES Act, some claim there was a reinforcement later on the order of $2 trillion again, 2 times because CARES Act was 2.2 trillion, so overall 6 trillion. I do not get it. Then later the loans part, a great deal not used. That part, I got it. What was going on with the CARES Act is there was $455, $455 billion, sorry, that was supposedly sent over to the Fed. Only there was no $455 billion. There was $455 billion worth of Treasury securities that were assigned to the Fed, and the Fed could use those securities to back a $4.6 trillion credit line for large corporations to use to stabilize themselves. You add that to the 2.2 trillion and you get 6.6 trillion. So it was that lending facility, special vehicle facility set up at the Fed, that was the reinforcement that brought it up over 6 trillion. Very little of that was used. Very little of that was used because the very existence of the 4.6 trillion created a situation where the private sector companies could sell their own securities to the public to get whatever money they needed to get through the crisis, to make them flush through the crisis. So they sold their own bonds. They didn't have to use the special facility. So in the last few weeks, what happened was that Steve Mnuchin took back those bonds and said to the Fed, we're shutting down the facility. It's done its work. We're shutting down the facility. We don't need to have that $4.6 trillion available any longer, except I think 45 billion of it was used or something like that. So anyway, we're now shutting it down. It no longer is in existence. The $4.6 trillion loan fund was set up under Section 13.3 of the Fed Act. That was the authority that it was set up under. Turns out the Fed didn't even really need to use that. It had the authority to make those loans under Section 14, but it never used its Section 14 authority. Had it done so, it would have been better, because when using Section 13.3, what the Fed had to do was to collaborate with the Secretary of the Treasury on the interest rates that would be granted to users of the facility. So part of that money was supposed to be for setting up a lending facility for states and local governments, for the municipalities, state and local municipal lending facility. Almost no states use that facility because Mnuchin saw to it that the interest rates were high enough that they would not compete with the private loan markets. What the secretary wanted to do was force the states to take the private loans so his cronies in that market could make money. That's what was going on there. So the municipalities and states never used those loan funds. The interest rates were too high. It was too expensive for them. Meanwhile, the big corporations digging into those loan funds were able to get interest rates that were near zero. And the states and local communities were starved with high interest rates and could not use that. If the Fed had used its authority under Section 14, then Mnuchin wouldn't have been a part of it. They could have given the near zero interest rates to states and local communities. But for some reason, Jay Powell didn't want to grab the bull by the horns and do that. But now, with Congress doing nothing for states and local governments, Powell, I think, will be afraid that's going to cost too many jobs. And he has a mandate to try to maximize employment as well. Not only price stability, but also employment under the Humphrey-Hawkins Act of 1978. So maybe Biden can now convince him to use his authority under Section 14 to get funds to the states and localities that they need. And here we are. We've had it with Macron, that's France. And sorry, I scrolled too fast. There were a bunch of Proud Boys in D.C. today. Yes, there were. What do you think about state-based Medicare for all? For the long run, I don't think the states will be able to sustain it, but I think some of the more prosperous states will have the money that, with the assistance under the Affordable Care Act, they will be able to have single-payer systems. I think California will be able to have it. Once people see how successful it is in California, they will pressure to nationalize it. People will begin to pressure to nationalize it. That's what I think will happen, Susan. Oh, by the way, Susan, I noticed you're working for Partners Healthcare in the Boston area. When I was working in the knowledge management area some years ago now, I wrote a case study involving Partners Healthcare. It was very, very interesting case study. It was a case study that illustrated a paradigm case success for knowledge management. The article in which I wrote it up, but with a collaborator, I won an award in the learning organization publication as the best article of that year. So of course, I have a very favorable view of Partners Healthcare. Okay, I've skipped over a number of comments here. I scrolled down too fast. I cannot get back to it. It's already 11:15, so I'm going to pick up the highlights now, and then I'm going to start to sign off. So Catherine said, Carmen Muniz, don't get me started. I spent a lot of dollars I don't have trying to help. She is getting liver supplements. When I gave her pain pills, she had a really bad day. I think this kind of pills hurt the liver. Russ said, I've got to turn in. Enjoy the evening. Thanks, Russ. Catherine says, Carmen Muniz, she has up and down days. Carmen says, it's nice that she has you. Catherine said, most of these guys seem to do okay with COVID. Remarkable. Well, I think they're a little younger if it's the guys we were talking about before. Kay says, meds for pets are as bad as meds for people in this country under sick care. And Evelina Pont, that Cynthia Freeland, but Trudeau's number 2 is a doozy herself. It's actually Chrystia Freeland, Chrystia. She used to be a correspondent for the press here. I think she was a CNN correspondent, as I recall, working in the financial sector. but I may be wrong about that. She might have been, okay, an MSNBC correspondent. But it was one of those two networks. Catherine Tokarska said, don't get me started. Carmen says, can I secede from these COVID quarantine accumulated fat cells? Unfortunately not. Carmen says, oh, and if anyone needs a free chin, you can have one of mine, laugh out loud. Kay says, I know Catherine, been there and did that. I wanted to go with Sasha, but they wouldn't have that. Why shouldn't people have an option too? Catherine says, oh my fucking God, I look like I'm about 2 months pregnant right now, 20 fucking pounds and still shoveling into the pie hole. Stephen Day says, people not disabled who can't work because of C19 are under an induced disability, qualify them for SSDI, federal direct relief. I hope so. Catherine says, Carmen Muniz, I need to do some water fasting. Carmen says, water is wonderful. My problem is inactivity due to fatigue. Antonio Calza said, paper is the best. See this lady from the Atlantic. Antonio links to Guardian of the Vote. I'm sure that's a good piece. Catherine says that cloud over New York skyline behind you, Joe, needs to move. Sorry, it's not a movable background, I'm afraid. Evelina says, but Carmen Muniz, just joking, but calling white Iowans corn-eating pigs is a little extreme. Yeah, Ryan Cooper is normally a very well-mannered guy, but I don't think he liked the Vilsack appointment at all. Carmen says, I cut my tofu into pork chop shapes and made fake pork chops. Yum. Carmen, you're really creative. Fake pork chops. Catherine says, cease and desist permanently is a discharge. But can't that be undone by the next administration to come in? Whereas if you simply cancel the debt, or maybe you're telling me that a permanent cease and desist order is canceling the debt. I don't know whether that is legally true or not in this case, Catherine. But if it is, then I certainly agree with you. Kay says, hell, I just found out that my Medicaid company doesn't even cover me in the whole state of Ohio. How useless is that? Carmen says, not pertaining to all Iowans, only the corrupt, neoliberal and racist ones. Evelina says, very. Antonio says, gives a link to verifiedvoting.org team. Antonio gives another link to them. Same link, actually. Carmen says, of course. Catherine says it's 90% plus the U.S. government now. Evelina says, you should get the Iowans on tofu, laugh out loud. Antonio says, Barbara Simons on C-SPAN. Why should we go to Barbara Simons on C-SPAN, Antonio? And Carmen says, Bonnie doesn't just walk, she sachets. No, Bonnie doesn't sachet. Antonio says, to be head of HUD, one has to be a U.S. citizen. I would try that after Ben Carson, anything is possible. At least I am from civil engineering. Susan asked me what I thought about state-based Medicare for all, and I've already answered the question. Steve Day says, U.S. states don't issue currency. Hashtag Medicare for all must be federal single payer. In the long run, I think that's true, Steve. I agree. States would not be able to sustain that. Many states would not even be able to afford it, even with the federal help. But some of the states with a big tax base might be able to afford it with the federal help coming under the Affordable Care Act. Carmen says, except for the Proud Boys. Kay says, a bunch of Proud Boys in D.C. today. Evelina says, I can see her tiptoeing about. Carmen says, they got into it with the cops, I read. Evelina says, like a ballerina. Carmen says, but through the tulips. Kay says, yes, they did. Some arrests I heard. Carmen says, hope they got a good old underhanded, sadistic police ass whooping like they give to people in the hood. Uh, huh. Kay says, me too, Carmen. Kay says, protest and arrest in Paris today, too. All the people are rising up. Antonio says, Professor, can we do something on Medicare for all? Something thorough, like read the bill with us. I'm a bit stuck and never read one of those long bills. It's not easy to analyze what is there and what is not. One has to be really in the USA and know people. Perhaps if you could bring Bernie Sanders here. I don't think I could get Bernie to come because my audience is too small. I don't even think that um, I could um, have Pramila come. But I'll tell you what, Antonio, some time ago, when the bill was originally introduced in the Congress by Jayapal, I did more than one live stream on it. It's out there. I'll try to find you the links and send you the links. I went over the bill pretty carefully then, and I had links to it then, and I was reading parts of it. So I think I can get those links to you. Evelina says they have had it with Macron, and Kay says yes, they have, and I don't blame them. Yeah, I'm surprised he's lasted as long as he has. Uh, and Steve says, where have I been? Smiles. Carmen Muniz, Daisies. Steve Day says hashtag FJG. Indeed. Evelyn says, where have you been? Do tell. Carmen says, great job, Dr. Joe. Kay says, always enjoyed these discussions. Thank you all. Steve Day says, support livers with milk thistle. Kay says, love you all. You people are great to talk with. Steve says, trying to get my phone back on without a phone, laugh out loud. It's not happening. I've been quarantined 7 to 10 days. Didn't want to put anyone at risk. Okay, I'm good to good, but now it's the we, so that's what. Okay. Evelina says, me too, always end up having a laugh, even while frustrated with all the baloney going on elsewhere. Kay says, exactly, Evelina. Steve says, without a phone, typo. Carmen says, I use it for much more. Had rhinitis last night. Stopped in its tracks. Wow, that's pretty good. And Catherine says, bankruptcy discharge doesn't eliminate the debt. It is a permanent bar for collections. Yeah, but I don't think that Biden is going to do a bankruptcy discharge. I thought he was just going to cancel the debts. And Steve says, see the article on the DNC interfering, causing the Iowa disaster. Duh. Which Iowa disaster, Steve? Catherine says, make it same for student loans without need for court order. And Dolores says, thank you and good night all. And thank you for coming, Dolores, and good night to you. Steve Gonzo says, bummer. Okay, I'm glad you're okay then. Evelina said that to Steve Gonzo. We are very glad you're okay, Steve. Very, very glad. And thank you for sending me that notice about what's happened to Joy Man. I'm grateful for that. And Kay says C-SPAN is covering the Proud Boys in D.C. today. And Carmen says, sleep tight, snuggle. Thank you, Carmen. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm ending now.